I tried beating a Pokemon HeartGold Nuzlocke by only using the 12 accessible starter Pokemon in the game, and basically my only accessible type is of course Water, Fire, and Grass, the big three of Pokemon types, and that's a huge problem later in the video when I run into teams I have no real advantage against. This Nuzlocke was probably the hardest I've ever done, so make sure to stick around to the end of the video and consider subscribing. Helps me out a lot, but now let's get into the video. We start off in the town of Newbark, where we can receive our first Pokemon, which won't really matter because we already have every starter from Gen 1 and 2 to start, and it will really affect our rival Silver's team. And I'm a lore nerd, so I picked Cyndaquil. So Silver has a Totodile, which is the Pokemon he has in the manga, and the manga and the games are basically the exact same stories. Not exactly the same, but pretty similar. Also kind of ironic saying that because I've actually never read the Pokemon Adventures manga because I have the attention span of a goldfish and can't read without getting bored. Anyway, we can find all of our starter Pokemon here on Route 1, our entire team for just Gen 1 and Gen 2. Of course, we can find Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, Chikorita, and of course Totodile. And we already have Cyndaquil. And I was going to name them, but I kind of forgot this was a Nuzlocke. So I forgot to name all of my Pokemon. So yeah, kind of a spoiler there. But now we have our first battle against Silver. And of course, he only has a Totodile that he stole. And since we have probably the best Gen 1 starter, Bulbasaur, you can pretty much write out how this one went. And after Silver runs away, he drops his ID or whatever it is, and I appropriately name him for our situation. But we don't need to get too prepared, as now it's time for our first gym battle against the Flying type specialist and the worst gym leader in any Pokemon game, in my opinion, Faulkner. Seriously, this dude loses all the war he had in Anapoke. Also, is it pronounced Anapoke or Anapoke? I honestly don't know. Moving on, of course, he starts with his weak level 9 Pidgey, and I lead with Cyndaquil, start spamming Quick Attack, and we take out Pidgey in just 3 turns. Next out is Pidgeotto. I start going for Embers, as it starts going for tackles. That does more than I expected, so I have to switch out into Charmander, and after Faulkner's Pidgeot Roost spams a ton of times, we eventually take it out, and oh my gosh, was it an annoying victory, but we claim our first badge, the Zephyr badge. Fortunately, to make up for that boring battle, we get to evolve Cyndaquil into Quilava as soon as the battle ends, and now it's time for the start of the Team Rocket storyline, as well as we have to face Proton now, and he leads with Zubat, so I lead with their newly evolved Quilava, and as his Zubat was low A, 1 Ember takes it out, and against Coughing, we do the exact same thing, only that time it took 2 Embers. Yeah, Proton wasn't really hard, not gonna lie, but it's going to be pretty hard soon, as we don't have a ton of counters for poison. Now with our level cap raised, though, we can start evolving most of our team, with Charmander into Charmeleon, Squirtle into Wartortle, Chikorita into Bayleaf, and last but not least, Bulbasaur into Ivysaur. And speaking of the level cap, it's time to head over to Azalea Town to challenge the Bug-type gym leader Bugsy, and we should have the advantage with Bug types with our fire starters, as he starts with his ace, Scyther, as he sets up Focus Energy, and I start spamming Smokescreen and a Quick Attack the next turn does have to Quilava, and now we get Scyther down to -2, so that's enough for Quilava, so I swap into Charmeleon, and an Ember does just above half, and Scyther's Quick Attack gets a crit, as I stay in going for another Ember, activating Scyther's Citrus Berry, and Scyther's next to Quick Attack misses, and an Ember gets it down to red as Bugsy heals Scyther. Another Ember, this is going to get really repetitive, gets a burn, and we eventually take out Scyther, and last of course was Kakuna and Metapod, and do I even have to explain what happened? We won pretty easily receiving the high badge. I mean, come on, they only know Harden and Tackle. And now before we leave Azalea, we can battle Silver again, or as I should call him by his real name, Poop Man. Anyway, Silver leads with a Ghastly, and I lead with Wartortle, and a bite easily OHKOs. Next is a Zubat, and 2 bites also ends up taking it out, but due to Supersonic, we're now confused, so I swap into Ivysaur anyway since Croconaw is up next. And again, you've guessed it, took it out easily with 2 Vine Whips. And before we challenge Whitney, we can evolve Totodile into Croconaw, and now we're all set for the battle, so let's get straight into it. She leads with a Clefairy, and I lead with Venusaur, as I set up Leech Seed, as Clefairy goes for a Mimic, learning the Leech Seed as well. And the next turn, it doesn't go for Leech Seed, but rather it goes for Metronome that turned into Lick, not doing much. And I poison Clefairy with a Poison Powder. The next turn, after my first poison attempt, miss, but then Clefairy pulls off a freaking Magma Storm from Metronome that did a ton of damage. But we get health back from Leech Seed, as next it is a Vital Throw, and I just go for a Vine Whip, and Leech Seed plus Poison takes Clefairy down to red, making Whitney have to heal up. And after that, it was an extreme of Vine Whips and Clefairy's Metronome that didn't even do any attacking moves, and we eventually took out Whitney's first Pokemon. She then sends out her final Pokemon, and probably the most annoying Pokemon in the entire game series, her Miltank as she goes for an attract, so I set up Leech Seed in the next turn. Stomp gets a critical hit, and Miltank makes Ivysaur our first death of the Nuzlocke. So I then send in Bayleaf as an attract, ends up immobilizing Bayleaf the next turn as I tried to set up Poison Powder, and a Stomp the next turn fortunately doesn't do much, and then we get mobilized again, and eventually we get a Poison Powder up, but a Lumberry immediately gets rid of all that hard work. We then get super low with Bayleaf, and we are forced to switch into our Charmeleon as Miltank heals up all the way after she goes for a Stomp. That doesn't do much, and Dragon Rage gets Miltank into red, plus Leech Seed gets Miltank to at least 5 HP, and another Dragon Rage takes it out. Also, how does this girl crash out after she just lost? You just murdered my Ivysaur in broad daylight! And of course, that unfortunately means we have to put Ivysaur in the dead box that I'm just now realizing I forgot the A and accidentally put a C instead of a D. Embarrassing, but now it's time to get our saving grace since we can continue through Gen 3 as we can find the Gen 3 grass starter, Treecko. Of course, we can immediately evolve Treecko into Grovyle, and in Burn Tower, we can battle Silver. And I decided to lead with Croconaw since I think he's the only starter we haven't led with, or at least used either off camera or on camera, as Silver leads with Ghastly, and we get confused from a Confuse Ray, but it doesn't matter. Croconaw pulls through and one-shots with a Bite. And the next Pokemon out is Magnemite, and of course, I switch into Charmeleon, and we can get another Oko on Silver with Charmeleon's Ember. Although we got paralyzed like 3 to 4 times, so it took a bit, but trust me, we got it. And we also have to switch out either way because we have a type disadvantage against Croconaw. Anyway, so I swapped to our newly acquired Grovyle, and an Absorb does barely anything, and Croconaw's Ice Fang gets us down to 13 HP. So I switch into Wartortle, and he tanks an Ice Fang, and I'm gonna be real, we exchanged bites for a long time, and I switched into Bayleaf last turn, and one shot with a Razor Leap defeating Silver. Yo, what's good, Editor? Me here. That wasn't the end of the battle, actually, but don't worry, we escaped easily with 0 casualties. As now it's time to challenge our halfway mark gym leader, Morty, as he leads with Ghastly, and I send out Quilava, and a Flame Wheel gets it down to red, so Morty is forced to heal after a spike from Ghastly, and another Flame Wheel repeats the exact same action, this time critting, taking out his first Ghastly, and he sends out the big cheese immediately, Gengar, as a Flame Wheel unfortunately doesn't do much, and a Sucker Punch does half Quilava's health, but thankfully we get a crit Flame Wheel activating Gengar's Citrus Berry, and then I make a horrible mistake. I thought I would have lived considering Gengar's last move, which is the lucky crit, but it was not even close to that, as a dumb decision for me causes the second death of the Nuzlocke. I send out Wartortle to avenge Quilava's death, and 2 bites ends up taking it out, but a Shadow Ball got Wartortle into the somewhat deep yellow, as next out is Haunter, and Haunter sets up Curse, and a bite takes it out, but thankfully Curse does not kill Wartortle and leaves him with just 4 HP. Lastly is his second Haunter, which to this day I think should still be a Mischievous. I mean, you're literally in Johto, but you're using the Gengar line? I mean, come on, what are we doing? Whatever. Anyway, I swap to Croconaw as it goes for Nightshade that does barely anything to Croconaw, and after a heal from Morty, Hunter goes for a Nightshade, and Croconaw lives with just 1 HP, and somehow we win the Fog Badge after a clutch bite from Croconaw. But unfortunately, this does mean for the second gym battle in a row, we have to send another Pokemon to the death box. But a replacement for Quilava is really good as we run into a Torchic, immediately evolving it into a Combuskin. And we can evolve one more Pokemon as well since the level cap has been raised, evolving Croconaw into its final stage for Alligator. And we don't even get time to breathe, as it's now immediately time to face our next gym leader, Chuck, as he may only have 2 Pokemon, but he is insanely powerful, leading with Infernape. I send out our newly caught and evolved Combuskin, as Infernape sets up a double team, and a Peck immediately misses, just my luck. As it keeps spamming double team, he eventually gets a Peck off, and I'm gonna be real, Primeape was pretty easy to deal with, and since after all that he tried to get a Focus Punch off, but we wouldn't let him, and I switched into Bayleaf, getting the KO with a Razor Leaf, and this is perfect, as next is Poliwrath, and it immediately puts it to sleep with Hypnosis, and eventually after 2 Focus Punches it takes down Bayleaf, 3 deaths and 3 gyms. I then send out our Grovyle as he tries to get a Focus Punch, but I stop him with a Leaf Blade. Unfortunately, it acted Poliwrath's Berry as well, making it a 3-shot kill, and yeah, I'm gonna be real, after that, the rest was history, but this was our 3rd death in our 3rd straight gym. We're gonna have to lock in if we're gonna want to beat this game. And this is gonna be our last grass starter replacement as well, as we replace Bayleaf with a Turtwig and evolve it into not only a Grottle, but with the new level cap, we can evolve it into a Torterra as well. And next up is Jasmine's gym, and we have the type advantage with fire and even water types, so she sends out with Magnemite, and let's be real, we got a 4 Pokemon who are strong against steel. We can easily take out both of our Magnemites with an Ember from Combuskin. Lastly is Steelix though, and an Ember does half as it heals back up to almost full with a berry. It then does nothing the next turn with a screech, and so to make this battle faster, I swap into Feraligatr and we take out Steelix with a surf, easily winning our 6th badge. And now that the level cap is above 36, we can now fully evolve our team of Charizard, Blastoise, Feraligatr, Sceptile, Blaziken, and Torterra. And now it's time for our first matchup against Petrel, as he leads with a Zubat. And I send out Blaziken, and a Blaze Kick one-shots it. I mean, come on, we're 16 levels above, and we do the same to Coughing and Eradicate. Yeah, maybe Team Rocket is not as good as I remember them being. Of course, we have to take on Ariana again. Hopefully it's a chat. Oh, no, okay, okay, easy dub again. Okay, whatever. Now we can get our second to last gym badge before we take on the Pokemon League, as we have our 7th gym battle against Pryce, as he sends out Seals. So I start with a Blaziken, and since I forgot Seals Pure Water, I have to swap into Sceptile, as Pryce goes to set up Hail, and a Leaf Blade the next turn from Sceptile KOs. Suddenly comes out Dewgong, so I switch to Blaziken, predicting an Ice-type move, as Dewgong hits us with an Aurora Beam. That does nothing, and Double Kick the next turn takes it down to red, forcing Pryce to heal, and we KO the next 2 turns with a Double Kick. He then sends out his very underwhelming ace, Piloswine, as not gonna lie, it was surprisingly tanky, and as I was going for Double Kick, it healed, and since Double Kick didn't even do half, that left Blaziken with just 7 HP, so I just swap into Feraligatr and one-shot with the Surf. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't just swap into a Water type to begin the battle against Piloswine, but whatever. And chronologically, another battle against Petrel is next, but honestly, dude has 5 coughings and a wheezing. These Team Rocket executives have to lock in, bro. So yeah, we can just skip that, like we do with every battle against Petrel. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his name right either. People are probably going to get mad at that. But anyway, before we take on the rest of Team Rocket executives, we have to battle our rival Silver once more. And he leads with Golbat, and I send out Charizard, and a Fire Fang does half, as it goes for Air Slash. And I don't know what I was thinking, but it didn't do anything to Big Zard, baby. And we KO the next turn with a Fire Fang. Next is Feraligatr, so I immediately swap into Sceptile. And forgot that Feraligatr had Ice Fang, but it wouldn't matter, as next turn Silver went for Water Gun, and Sceptile 2-shots with a Leaf Blade plus Pursuit. Next is Sneasel, as I swap into Feraligatr, as Sneasel goes for a Fan Attack that does minimal damage. As I go for Surf and 2-shot, however, Sneasel gets off a crit Fan Attack, leaving Feraligatr deep in the red. And his next mom is Magnemite, so of course I'm obligated to switch into Blaziken, as Magnemite paralyzes with a Thunder Wave, and a Sonic Boom doesn't do anything, and we don't get paralyzed the next turn, and an Ember takes it out. And lastly is Haunter, and even after a Shadow Ball does a lot, Blaze Kick is even stronger, and we beat Silver deathless for the millionth time. But now it's time to go back to the Rocket Hideout, and we would have our first battle against Proton, but for some reason the game skipped over the battle, so yeah, I don't know what happened there, but blame Game Freak, not me. But now we have to take on Ariana, as she leads with Arbok, so I send in Torterra, as Arbok's Crunch doesn't really do anything against Torterra, but then his Earthquake one-shots Arbok. But now Murkrow is up next, as a Wing Attack does a good amount of damage to us, and a Bite from us doesn't do anything, and honestly, I don't know why I did that, because Honchkrow is half dark, so yeah, anyway, moving on from our mistakes, we swap to Blastoise, and he tanks a Wing Attack very easily, so I go for Skull Bash, and after Murkrow's Nightshade does a bit of damage to us, Skull Bash does even more, taking Murkrow down to red, and Ariana doesn't heal, and we beat Murkrow with an Aqua Tail. But now Blastoise is super low, as she sends out her last Pokemon, Vileplume, and this was easy. We just gotta switch into Blaziken, and 2 Embers takes it down. And no pauses in this gameplay, as we're gonna have to take on our 4th, technically 3rd, because Proton is chiller or something, I guess, but yeah, 4th Team Rocket executive, Archer, as he leads with Houndour, and a Blastoise leads with Okoing with his newly learned Water Pulse. I don't know why Archer would immediately send out his ace with the type disadvantage, but 2 Water Pulses does the trick, as Archer's last spawn is, wow, what do you know, it's a gosh dang coughing for the millionth time, as we swap out for an easy dub again. Seriously, dude, if Team Rocket didn't use coughing so much, it would be so much better. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore, man. Anyway, moving on from the evil team story, now that Team Rocket is disbanded, we can battle Clair for our 8th gym battle. And yeah, this one's gonna be tough, as she leads with Gyarados, so I send out Torterra, as Dragon Rage doesn't do much, so I set up Leaf Seed, and it was an exchange of Dragon Rages and Razor Leafs until eventually she swaps into Dragonair. So I swapped to Blastoise, as I predicted her to go for Fire Blast, and was correct, and an Ice Beam takes Dragonair down to red, but unfortunately we get paralyzed with Thunder Wave, as Clair heals the next turn, and I go for Ice Beam again, and we knock out her Dragonair the next turn. She then sends out her second Dragonair, as after her Dragon Pulse, we get paralyzed the first turn, and another takes us down to red as we get Dragonair deep into yellow as well with an Ice Beam. I then swap into Charizard as Dragonair goes for Slam that does roughly 30 damage, and her Dragon Claw takes out her second Dragonair. As next I thought she was going to go for Gyarados and forgot she had a Kingdra, so I'm forced to swap to Feraligatr, suspecting a water type move as Hydro Pump crits and takes us down to 13 HP. Just my luck. And I knew it was time for a sacrifice, thinking Hydro Pump had low accuracy and it could possibly miss, but it doesn't, and Feraligatr goes down. I then swap into Sceptile and I go for a Leaf Blade as Kingdra goes for a Smoke Screen as another Leaf Blade activates her berry. And next up I go for Dragon Pulse, taking Clair's Kingdra down, who is probably her toughest mon, as Gyarados, her last mon, goes out again. And surprisingly I swap out into Charizard as Gyarados goes for a Dragon Pulse that doesn't do that much, and a Dragon Claw from us also doesn't do much, unfortunately. And after Dragon Rage from Gyarados, we go for Fly and we eventually take out Gyarados. And after Clair finally gives us our badge, eventually after however long, we won the Legend Badge, our final badge before the Johto League. But for Feraligatr being our 4th death of the Nuzlocke sucks, because that means all Johto starters are gone in their hometown games. Also ignore the Shining Gyarados in the dead box, he'll be gone eventually. But now we have to find a replacement for Feraligatr, and honestly I'm very excited for it, as we find my personal favorite Pokemon, Swampert. Well, actually, I don't know if I like Mudkip or Machamp more, but whatever. Just the entire line in general. And before we take on our final challenge, we have to challenge our not as good challenge, Silver. He, of course, leads with Sneasel, so I lead with Blaziken for the easy one-shot KO. And next is Kadabra, so I swap into Tora, and as it sets up Reflect, and it also goes for a Side Beam the next turn, as Reflect, it won't matter, as our physically attacking bite will take it out. Next is Golbat, and I swap to Charizard. And Dragon Claw does barely anything, and Golbat lands a Confuse Ray the next turn, and we kept hitting ourselves in confusion. Not gonna lie, until eventually we got off a Flamethrower, and in like 4 turns, we one-shot the Golbat. Was that too hard, Charizard? What are we doing? Next is his own starter, Feraligatr. Aw, cute. Mine just died. Anyway, like every time we battle his Feraligatr, we swap into a grass type. The grass type this time being Sceptile, and we 2-shot. Second to last, we have Haunter as a Dragon Pulse from Sceptile one-shots. Oh, except never mind. Game Freak wants to screw me over. And guess what? It is on a sliver of 1 HP. This is a load of barnacles. Anyway, we immediately kill the next turn, and after we beat him, he sends out Magneton, and we one-shot with a Blaze Kick from the GOAT, Blaziken. As now it's time for that challenge I promised, of course the challenge being the Elite Four, as first of all, we have to take on our first member of the Elite Four, Will, as he starts out with a Xatu and I lead with a Torterra, as he gets a Confuse Ray on us immediately, but we get a Crunch, getting him what is basically into red, as even though we get confused and hit ourselves in the next 2 turns, we still win with a Crunch. Next out is Jinx, and I swap to Blaziken, as Ice Punch from Jinx doesn't do a thing to Blaziken, and Blaze Kick Okos, as next up is Slowbro, and I swap into Sceptile, and Slowbro spam curses his entire turn, and eventually, after a ton of Leaf Blades and a ton of healing from Will, we eventually take down Slowpoke. Then Will sends out his other Xatu, so I swap into Swampert, as unfortunately we get confused the first turn, and we hit ourselves the first turn, but thankfully Psychic doesn't do much, but then we hit ourselves again, of course, so I'm forced to swap into Charizard, as Psychic does just below 50 to him, but Dragon Claw does barely any damage, and we can survive one more Psychic as I go for Dragon Claw, activating Xatu's Berry, and I'm forced to switch into Blastoise as he tanks an Aerial Ace, and we get hit with a Confuse Ray and hit ourselves, and another Psychic takes us down to yellow, so I swap to Blaziken and take a Psychic, then a Blaze Kick takes it out. So yeah, we could have easily taken out Xatu immediately, but whatever. Anyway, it's time for Exeggutor, and I was hesitant to go for a Blaze Kick since Blaziken was low for some reason, but it wouldn't matter. We one-shot, and we take over victory over William. That's right, I called him by his first name. William. Next up is Koga, who is basically a bug type trainer, and honestly his first 2 Pokemon we just easily one-shot with Charizard, so we don't even have to review that. Anyway, next up is Muck, and I immediately swap into Torterra as Muck starts to spam Minimize, but it won't matter because the Earthquake from Torterra one-shots, as next is Venomoth, and again, bug type trainer, swap into Charizard, kill with Flamethrower, life goes on. Lastly is Koga's Crobat, and it starts spamming Double Team, but Flamethrower is just way too good, and even after a berry activation, we end up getting the kill. with Blastoise because I was scared of Charizard dying to poison. Anyway, now that we're done with Koga, it's on to Bruno as he leads with Hitmontop, and similarly to Koga, this should be pretty easy as we one-shot with a Brave Bird for his first Pokemon from Blaziken. As next up is Ononix, and even though we have a type disadvantage, I can just go for Brick Break, and that gets Ononix into red, and thankfully he just sets up Sandstorm the first turn as Bruno goes for a full restore, and we can two-shot with a Brick Break. Next is Machamp, and like Hitmontop, we can immediately one-shot with a Brave Bird, but now we're super low, and against Hitmonlee, I switch into Charizard, and he goes for a high jump kick, and I go for Fly, but we don't land it, but thankfully Hitmonlee just goes for a Focus Energy, clutching up for us, which is kind of dumb to say that since he didn't mean to do it on purpose. Anyway, next time we don't miss a Fly, one-shotting Hitmonlee, and lastly is Hitmonchan, who has all the elemental punches, and we could go for a Fly, but that is 100% accurate, and as a wise man said, if it's not 100% accurate, it is 50% accurate. But I risked it anyway and one-shot Hitmonchan, and it's on to Karen. And against Karen, she first leads off with Umbreon, and I lead with Blaziken, and a Brick Break gets Umbreon barely into red, and Umbreon starts spamming Double Team as Karen immediately restores Umbreon back to full, and I go for Ember, hoping for a burn, and we get it somehow, as Karen decides to switch to Houndoom, and a Brick Break one-shots. Well, Pryce was definitely, underwhelming. Anyway, next out is Murkrow, and I don't know why I keep doing this. I always send out Torterra against Murkrow thinking it's pure flying for whatever reason, and I mean, I don't even know why I would do that. First of all, it's flying, so I mean, I don't know what I'm thinking there, but yeah, we go for a Crunch, and a Plunk does way too much, and yeah, we're forced to swap out. Again, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm thinking, but yeah. We swap out into Swampert, and we try to get off of Muddy Water, but it dodges, and we tank another Pluck, but thankfully we get another Muddy Water to one-shot the next turn, so hey, in a way, I mean, technically, if it wasn't for my stupidity, we wouldn't have one-shot, so hey, keep that for future consideration. If you're not stupid, you're not gonna make it in life. Don't probably use that mindset. It's especially weird that I don't remember that because this is the generation that Dark type was introduced, or the region at least. But anyway, next is Vileplume, and Swampert is just like me, 4 times weak to grass. So we swap to Charizard, and of course we get the easy KO. And lastly is Gengar, which is BS. Gengar is Poison Ghost. Seriously, there is a problem with the first 2 gens Elite Four. Anyway, I went for Fly and it did half, and we actually easily won the battle with another Fly. So yeah, I kind of crashed out for no reason there, but we are on to the champion battle, which is against Lance, and we might have the worst possible team for him. We are weak in almost every type, but regardless, we have to show up, as we lead with Gyarados, and I start with Charizard, and I thought Fly was going to do a lot, but it didn't, and Waterfall from Gyarados gets us down to yellow, and for whatever reason, I was thinking I didn't swap, going for another Fly that didn't even get Gyarados into yellow, and we died a Waterfall. What was I thinking? And yeah, 5th death to the Nuzlocke, but who cares? We can still pull through. Big whoop, unsurprised about it. Anyway, I swap into Blastoise to get off an Ice Beam, but misclick going for an Aqua Tail, as it goes for Flail, and it didn't do much. And you want to know what else didn't do much? Yeah, Ice Beam didn't. And Lance heals back to full. And even after I spammed all the moves that I could and defeated Gyarados, Blastoise was still in deep red, as I thought I could outspeed Dragonite, which is stupid to think, by the way, and we don't, losing Blastoise to his first Dragonite. That's right, his first Dragonite, not even his second. No, 3rd. We need to calm down, though. Next is Sceptile, and thankfully we have Dragon Balls, and it does half, but then we get paralyzed by a Thunder Wave, and Dragon Rush gets a full paralysis, and thankfully we dodge the next one, and Dragon Pulse takes out his first Dragonite. Let's go. Clutch up, Sceptile. That's how you do. But that high wouldn't last for a millisecond, as Lance sends out a Charizard, so I swap out Swampert, and as he tanks an Air Slash, but then we miss a Muddy Water, and gets to deep yellow with an Air Slash. But eventually we one-shot with a Muddy Water, but next is his second Dragonite. I go for Protect, and find out his Dragonite has Blizzard. So I swap to Blaziken, as Dragonite goes for Dragon Rush, and does well above half. And again, we lose one of our team members, and after that, we can't do anything at all, so cue the sad music. You know that one Pokemon song. Editor, you can't be this stupid, just play the damn song! Yep, there you go. Yeah, give me views. Yeah, views. Yeah, that's what we like. Okay, now I'm gonna do my fake sad YouTuber voice. We lose Torterra to a Blizzard as well as Swampert, and eventually, even though Sceptile clutched up a lot and dodged a ton of moves that would have killed him otherwise, after Lance healed up, it was wraps for him, and for the first time in my entire life, I have failed a Pokemon Nuzlocke. And that of course means we have to bench all of our starters, which is something you should never do, truly the unwritten rule of Pokemon, but we're forced to per Nuzlocke rules, and with that we have failed the challenge. So I hope you enjoyed that video, because obviously you did if you watched this far, so consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot, and I hope you enjoyed this video if you did. Goodbye.